Hello, welcome to another episode of Forgotten Cemeteries of the Pacific Northwest. Today we're in Harrison Cemetery, located in Vadis, Oregon, Washington County. Alternative names of the cemetery include Tompkins, Thule, and Vadis. So let's go meet some of the local residents and hear their story. There's a little history behind Harrison Cemetery. I have to say the cemetery was kind of a hidden gem. It wasn't listed anywhere in any of my books, to be honest. Maybe the Oregon Burial Site Guide, but other than that I just kind of stumbled upon it during an internet search. The internet website that I found that listed it looked like it was pretty old, from maybe like the late 90s, early 2000s. So Harrison Cemetery was established in 1856, has an estimated 25 to 100 burials. Walking through, I didn't see that many, to be honest, and maybe 20, 30, I guess, but then again, it is pretty overgrown, so there may be more headstones just kind of buried in time. From my understanding, the cemetery was last cared for by a woman named Judy Goldman in a 2011 interview I found on YouTube. I think the Oregon Historical Cemetery Society takes care of it. I think that's what the sign said out front, which may be part of Metro. There is a 2019 burial here though, so pretty recent, so it's not completely just done in a sense. It looks like it's still a little active, and it does look like someone's taking care of it. It looks like some of the grass was cut recently. Only a few headstones remain standing. Somebody went through the trouble long ago of marking each grave with like a metal plate. It's unknown who that is, but whoever you are, that was pretty cool of you. There are a few Corneliuses here. Remember, the last cemetery we visited was Cornelius Methodist Cemetery. This cemetery has some very early birth dates. 1805, for example, would be one of the earlier ones. The McKay and Tompkins family sort of dominates this cemetery overall. They were a popular early pioneer family in Oregon. The last name Patton also comes up in this cemetery. There's a Patton cemetery in Portland that I haven't visited yet. I'm planning on in the future. There's also a lot of young deaths in this cemetery as well, I noticed during going through Find and Grave. The only thing I could really find on Vadis was a quote from a cemetery website that had kind of all these old pictures of various cemeteries throughout Oregon, and the guy just referred to Vadis as a town of someone's imagination. Wasn't quite sure what that meant. The only other thing I could find on Vadis, Oregon was a little station on the Oregon Electric Railroad listed as Vadis. So I'm not even sure it's a town. I know there's a road next to here named Vadis, but overall, not much information on what that town was. So here we have John L. Northrup, Reverend to be exact. He almost broke the record for the oldest birth date that I found so far. Again, that's at Lewis Pioneer Cemetery, Adolpha Howard, 1790. But John comes in at 1795, so 5 years short. I picked this one because the last name Northrup is popping up a lot during my Pioneer Cemetery visits. If you remember at Shady Brook, I want to say, there was a few Northrups up there, so maybe they're related. I didn't get a chance to really dig deep on that history of that last name. I did track down John though, and found he came to Oregon with the 1845 crew. Looks like he traveled with 4 other Northrups: Mary, Harvey, Perrin, and EJ. More Northrups came in 1850 and 1852 as well. John was married in 1819 to a woman named Nancy Elizabeth Bard Davis. John and Nancy were both from New York. Nancy is buried at Union Point Cemetery, being she outlived John. John would die at the age of 63, while Nancy lived until 88 years old. So I found that Cornelius's plot over here in the back of the cemetery, more specifically Benjamin Cornelius Sr., who was born in 1802 in Christian County, Kentucky. Researching him and his wife, plus a ton of other Corneliuses, would migrate in 1845 to Oregon. Benjamin's wife, Elizabeth Adams Cornelius, is somewhere here in the cemetery. Unknown so far, but we'll try to keep an eye out for, like I said, A lot of the headstones appear to be vandalized here and busted and kind of pushed face down, if you will, so can't really lift them out of the ground and check the name, if you will. It'll be a little difficult. Here we have John Johnson Sr. He was born in 1803 in Holbeach, South Howland District, Lincolnshire, England. Now, John Johnson Sr. does not rest here. For some reason, his grave was moved to the Old Scotch Church Cemetery, which I plan on visiting in the future because I heard it's a pretty good one. A Find a Grave user also said the wrong year of death is on this headstone. If you look right there, it says 1872. And the Find a Grave user mentioned it's actually 1873. The only thing I could really find on John was he potentially traveled to Oregon in 1839, which would make him part of the very early pioneers in Oregon. He was a dairyman who was hired in England by John McClellan to help meet the needs of fulfilling contracts for dairy products to the Russians and trade for their furs. He was also working at Collis Farm in 1841 to 1842, which was a farm that was operated by the British near the Puget Sound. His family was from Holbeach, Lincolnshire, England. Okay, we have William R. Johnson here. Born in 1840 in Vancouver, Washington. He would be the son of John Johnson we just talked about, whose grave was moved to the Old Scotch Cemetery. William was a pretty good farmer and owned 320 acres, had a wife and 3 children. He's pretty successful, pretty happy guy, I imagine, at the time. However, one day there was a disagreement between William and a man named Tang Smith over an estate settlement. The two would meet at Jackson Farm area, and Tang would shoot William. William would die a week later from blood poisoning from a gunshot wound. Allegedly, there was like zero effort to capture Tang, but a posse was formed and they tracked him in the snow up to the mountain until the tracks disappeared. No one decided to track Tang from there because the description at the time of Tang was he was a bad man with a revolver and a knife. Anderson Smith, who was buried in Harrison Cemetery, was Tang's father. There's no listing of Tang being his son anywhere I've looked. He just sort of vanished from the records. So I'm not really sure what Tang is short for. I tried to do an internet search. Couldn't come up with anything. Maybe Tang turned outlaw. Other than that, never did find out what happened to the guy. Very interesting headstone here. This is a shared one between James Howe and Jesse Columbus Wilkes. They're buried together. They both died in a flood December 8th, 1857. I found an article from the Oregon Statesman from Tuesday, December 22nd, 1857, and it reads, "A sad disaster occurred on Tuesday night on Jackson Creek. A north branch broke off the Tualatin River, owing to heavy rains that fell during the day. The dam at Jackson Sawmill, being on this mountain, streamed about 20 miles southwest of Portland, gave way about 9 o'clock at night, precipitating a large body of water and a great number of logs, which I collected above the dam, with such violence against the grits mill as to sweep away instantly like mere cobwork, leaving scarcely a vestige remaining. 2 men, Mr. James Huff, the miller, and Jesse Columbus Wilkes, who was engaged in sacking flour, were the only people known to be at the mill at the time. They were lost. A search was made for their bodies by neighbors who recovered them from the following Thursday. One of them was bruised and mangled. They both left families to mourn their untimely fate." Here we have John Harrison. He was born in 1802. Could not find any information on John. Pretty early birth date, though, of 1802. I was hoping to find some story, but came up short. The only thing I could find really is that he was from England and he traveled with the 1844 migration crew. He was married to a woman named Mary Brown Smith Harrison. She was from Barron, Kentucky. Okay, here we have Charles Richard McKay Sr., probably the most prominent figure in this cemetery. Charles was born in C in 1808 while his parents were on the way from Scotland to Canada. His family was settled in Winnipeg, Manitoba, like Chris Jericho. In 1827, Charles married Letitia, I think I'm saying that right, Letitia? Have to look into that one, the daughter of the governor in the area during the time. We'll learn all about her and her journey next. Charles, his wife, and 3 children at the time joined a large party in 1841 destined for Oregon. Reading up on it, this migration was known as the Red River Migration and was led by a man named James Sinclair. James Sinclair at the time was a trader and explorer employed with the Hudson Bay Company. Really, in the grand scheme of things, the Hudson Bay Company had plans to strengthen their British claims in the Pacific Northwest, or was what known at the time as the Oregon boundary dispute. They viewed Sinclair as the guy for the job. The journey was quite epic, including passes unknown through the Rocky Mountains. They did have some assistance, though, from people that kind of knew the area from what I read. We now know these unknown passes as Sinclair Pass, Mount Sinclair, and White Man Pass. I guess the traveling family's procession was a mile long, including 2 two-wheeled carts and bands of horses and cattle. They did encounter some setbacks, as the carts were abandoned for some reason and didn't really say why. Maybe it just got troublesome. Maybe the terrain was like really bad. So they kind of finished up the trip on horseback. The pack did stop at Fort Spokane because Charles' wife, Letitia, gave birth to a 4th child. They allowed her to rest for 10 days and then they continued on their journey. At first, the pack settled in DuPont, Washington. It was apparently a major disappointment, as the soil was crap and the expectations didn't live up to the crew exactly. Plus, the English, apparently, the overseers of the area, were kind of jerks, and from my reading, unpleasant was the correct term. The pack would then move on to 1842 to Oregon, and McKay would ride his crew to Tualatin Valley. McKay would go on to find the city of Glencoe and form quite a name for himself in the area. As you can see here, the founder of Glencoe, one of the original pioneers. When the rumor started about forming a government in Champoeg, McKay would renounce his British allegiance and join up with the Americans, apparently. In 1853, when the provisional government was formally adopted, he was elected as captain. At this time, Indian warfare was on the rise in Oregon. McKay would offer up his services as a mounted rifleman. One interesting fact was McKay was the man who shot the famous Five Crows and shattered his arm. Five Crows was a Cayuse Indian chief and the most prominent of the Indian chiefs from my readings. Many years later, McKay and Five Crows would cross paths again, but in a good way. Five Crows is quoted as saying, "You tried to kill me and I tried to kill you, but I am not mad at you at all." Reading up on Five Crows, he used to come down to the northern plains regularly to sell ponies and was a well-known figure to former enemies, apparently creating friendships of some sorts with the pioneers. After the war, McKay left for the California gold mines. Unfortunately, McKay would return home in bad health and died in 1874. He was nicknamed Old Charlie McKay. Apparently, Charles was just well known throughout the entire state of Oregon. He was also a trapper for 40 years under the Hudson Bay, the fur trader. McKay appears to be one of the oldest pioneers in Oregon, based on my reading. And here we have Letitia Bird McKay. I am sorry if I'm massacring that first name. It looks like Letitia. So, she was the wife of Charles and was born in 1810 in Alberta, Canada. Reading her obituary, Letitia was known at the time of her death as the oldest living pioneer in Oregon. Many people refer to her as Grandma McKay. She came to Manitoba as a young girl, and at the time her father was James J. Bird, who was the governor of the Selkirk Settlement for 12 years. Reading up on the Selkirk Settlement, it all started with a man named Lord Selkirk in Scotland. There was something called the 45 Rebellion going on, where a British guy named Charles Edward Stuart was just hell-bent on regaining the British throne for his father. Lord Selkirk was getting concerned due to the plight of his Scottish kin and forced clearances to his farmers, apparently. At the time, his advisor said it may be time to eye up North America and just leave the country. Their only option was to immigrate. So he formed an alliance with the Hudson Bay Company and immigrated. The Hudson Bay Company apparently gave them 116,000 square miles. That's 5 times the size of Scotland, so you got a pretty sweet deal. The Selkirk Settlement is better known as the Red River Colony, a project that was set up in 1811 by Thomas Douglas, the 5th Earl of Selkirk. That land was granted to him by the Hudson Bay Company. You now know that Red River Colony as Manitoba, Canada. Back to Letitia. She was married to Charles in 1827. They would come to Oregon in 1841 during the migration known as the Red River Migration. We talked about that with Charles. They had three children during the time. Letitia would give birth to a 4th child while resting in Spokane, Washington, like we talked about before. I believe she had 10 children overall from what I read. She was a pretty giving and caring individual overall. Her obituary mentions that she raised 20 orphans, that her door was always open to the sick and needy. Hopefully I'm going to try to find one of her orphans is buried here, so I'm going to make an attempt to find her. Here we have Charles Richard McKay, born in 1829. He is the son of Charles and Letitia. He was actually born in Manitoba, Canada. He came to Oregon at the age of 12 in 1841. Charles would serve in the Cayuse War of 1848 as a 4th sergeant under Captain Shaw. Here we have John Privety Brooks. He was born in 1821 in Worcester, Massachusetts, and came to Oregon in 1843 by wagon train. He became one of the first public school teachers in the area and participated in one of the first newspapers. Unfortunately, John would die at the age of 44. So unfortunately, I couldn't find the last 2 people on my list. Those 2 individuals are Annette Smith and Alva Clement Phillips. There are some headstones in front of us that have that last name, but they're pretty wore down and they don't bear those 2 names. And then the person who put those metal plates on, one of those plates is missing. So maybe that's one of them. I'm not really sure, but I thought I'd, kind of film the Oregon country, farm country here and just talk about those 2 individuals since you just can't find them. Annette Smith was born in 1857. It's unknown on her death. Her parents were quite popular though. Her mother, Marie McKay Plumy, was one of the earliest pioneers traveling in 1841. A headline on a newspaper said she enjoyed being the distinction of being the oldest woman settler in Oregon, coming here in 1841. Marie's husband, Thomas Hardiman Smith, was the first postmaster of Portland in 1849. Moving on to Alva Clement Phillips. She was born in 1865. I think this individual is an example of Grandma McKay's reputation for being giving. Alva's mother died a few months after giving birth. And she was only 19 years old and is most likely buried here as well. Here's her husband, Clement Cooley Phillips, said, well, see you later, and took off. Alva would then be raised by Grandma McKay. After all, she was known for raising orphans. All right, time for our little mini tour. Over there we have the McKays. We talked about them. Overall, there's no like real order to this cemetery, I'd say. It's just kind of like you have massive plots of just weeds and grass and trees, and then a little plot will just pop up. There's also kind of just like singular graves, if you will. You just walk like, I don't know, 10 yards and you'll just see a headstone. And we talked about John Harris here. Get a little close-up of that. 1802 on his headstone. He's just by himself over here. There is a popular last name, Rafty, as well in the cemetery, I noticed. And I think there's a cemetery up the road like 6 minutes. It's called the Rafty Cemetery, so maybe we'll visit that one today. Kind of do a double header, check my notes, see if I have anything on that one. And there's Northrup that we talked about. That seems to be a popular name that's popping up lately in these older cemeteries. 1795. Almost broke the record. And here is Anderson Smith. We talked about his son. I believe his son was that guy named Tang that shot the other man and kind of took off towards the hill, or the mountains if you will, and they never did find him. And I don't think anyone knows what happened to him, to be honest. Couldn't find any information. This is a common theme here. Completely busted off its base, unfortunately. A lot of vandalism. And it's right next to a railroad track, so maybe that's what that little piece of information was referring to. It used to be next to an Oregon electric railroad. It's about the only thing I could find on Vadis, Oregon. Not even sure if it's a real town. If you visit the cemetery, there's absolutely zero parking. And when I mean zero parking, I mean none. I had to kind of wedge my truck over into a ditch to park. Hopefully nobody will hit it. But they get the feeling they definitely don't want people to visit here. Very narrow road, farm country, but if you have a little car, I could see you pulling it off, but I've got a big F-150, so big road hog. I wish I could make out this one. Henry, maybe? Not really sure. But unfortunately, another busted headstone off its base. Fortunately, they're kind of putting them face up, but some of them are face down, so I don't think we'll ever know who they are. I don't know who has time to lift them up and clean them up. I guess that's up to the Oregon Cemetery Society or Metro, maybe. Right here we have the Tompkins Plot. This is a very popular name here. You can see they have this behemoth of a headstone indicating their claim on this cemetery spot. We do have a Patton here, Pearl Patton, daughter of Robert Patton. I seem to remember that name from somewhere. Sorry, I'm kind of in the shot. Born in 1886. Patton is a popular last name as well, I'm coming across. A lot of Tompkins, jeez. Do have some Corneliuses here. Let me turn around. Not too fast. Looks like we have Eva here. 1833. And then we have more Corneliuses. Amanda, 1846. 1834 for William. Pretty much this whole strip here, well, almost. Kind of cuts off there for the Corneliuses, and Tompkins shows up again. There's an 1831. 34. Let's travel over here. You can see you kind of have to walk a good distance to get to another plot. Looks like this headstone's completely missing. We have Sterling Willis. No information on him. Looks like there's just plates. There's no date of birth, date of death, or anything. But what do we got here? We got Willis. Oh, okay. So it listed all of them. We got Sarah Holiday Willis, arrived in Oregon in 1852. Thomas Jefferson Willis, Olive Garwood Willis pals, infant twins in 1900. So that's pretty cool. Somebody went through a lot of trouble. Obviously that looks like an updated headstone. I looked back there, I didn't see anything, but like I said, it seems like a lot of the headstones, or even those plate style ones, have been swallowed by time maybe. This place does remind me of Cherry Grove, not Cherry Creek, like I said a million times in that one video. I can't believe I did that. Just kind of out in a little plot with overgrown forest. Oh, man, here's a really bad one. Jefferson Johnson, I think that says. I'm not sure if you can read that. That one's really weathered. It's cracked down the center. This is the Johnson's plot back here. It's kind of way in the corner. Let's see if we can get a little closer. There you go. 1844. Another Johnson. Looked like it was on a pretty tall headstone at one time until it got vandalized. And unfortunately, we have the same over here. And same over here, but no headstone. So we're not sure who this is. Doesn't have the plate as well indicating who it was. Way in the back by themselves is a woman named Eva North, born in 1883. Could not find anything on her, but all the way in the back by her lonesome self. Did buy a tripod finally, a little cheap one. It's not the greatest, but I think it'll help me kind of steady the camera. The one thing I notice is my hand kind of shakes a little bit when I'm trying to film and read my notes at the same time. So hopefully that's been cleaned up with this video. Just kind of setting up the tripod, getting my shot, and then just talking. I think we have one more plot over here. Let's see. Got Harrison. Look like they're from the 1800s, some of them. Sloan looks like they're, oh yeah, 2000, 2007. So you will see some kind of recent ones here. I just saw one earlier from 2019. So once in a while there's someone new buried here. I wouldn't say it's completely abandoned or haunted or all that stupid stuff. So it does look like someone cut the grass and is making an attempt to keep it clean, so that's cool. Apologies if there's noise. I think there's like a mini airport or something close to here. I keep hearing planes once in a while fly over, so hopefully that didn't interfere with the sound. Wildflower Restoration Project 2004, Oregon Commission of Historic Cemeteries. So the Harrison Cemetery Association, so maybe they're taking care of it, which is cool. And this one's pretty recent, yeah, 2019. And that is it for a walkthrough. There's one of those loud planes. So, hope you enjoyed the video. That's the end of it. Pretty short walkthrough overall. If you have any recommendations on other pioneer cemeteries in the Pacific Northwest, more specifically Oregon, that would help me. Leave a comment and have a great day. Hope you enjoyed the video.